Hi folks, this is Alan Watt and we're cutting through the matrix talking to John from Alaska about the school system. Carry on, John.
Yes. In my journey to awakening to how they've been trying to create this world culture, I've come across UNESCO, its purpose and its philosophy, written by Julian Huxley.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're probably familiar with that.
Yeah, I've read some of his stuff on the air, in fact, from his books, yeah.
Okay. Well, of course, you can get this for free online if any of your listeners would like to look through this. But would you mind if I read a few of the quotes?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. On page 57, it says, not much remains to be said in conclusion, but what remains is important. It is that the task before UNESCO is necessary, is opportune, and in spite of all multiplicity of detail, is single. And he says that task is to help the emergence of a single world culture. That's on page 57.
That's right.
On page 13, he says, the moral for UNESCO is clear. The task laid upon it of promoting peace and security can never be wholly realized through the means assigned to its education, science, and culture. He says it must envisage some form of world political unity, whether through a single world government or otherwise, and he says, and the only certain means for avoiding war. And let me see. Now, closing here, he has an interesting, well, this is on page 21. He has an interesting reference to eugenics and how they were going to push eugenics through UNESCO.
Yeah.
And it says, thus, even though it is quite true that any radical eugenic policy will be for many years politically and psychologically impossible, it will be important for UNESCO to see that the eugenic problem is examined with the greatest care and that the public mind is informed of the issues at stake so that much that is now unthinkable may at least become thinkable.
That's right. And what he was talking about there was terminating children, sterilizing the ones that they would claim were inferior. Now, remember too, UNESCO is United Nations, again, educational and scientific organization. He was the first CEO for it. He was also the top character who helped run the Margaret Sanger abortion clinics across the world. So he was all for reducing the inferior quality types of peoples. So carry on. Yeah.
But yes, I mean, now UNESCO was also investigated in California for being charged with pushing internationalism. A lot of people aren't aware of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's the United Nations right there pushing internationalism and world government and a world culture. And from what I've seen, Alan, it seems like they're pushing this hip-hop style culture on the entire planet, because I'm up here in Alaska, and when I got here, I was astonished to see the Native Americans here with the sagging pants and the loud music and things like that, because I figured I was getting away from that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And but it seems like they're pushing that on the entire planet, and they're using that to dumb down the language, and they're using that to also break down the families.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. The content of the wording, I mean, when you can make what the words are they're actually saying, or mumbling, I should say, and that's intentional too, so the parents, they close their heads off, they don't listen, they can't hear it. It's intentional for the children to understand it, and is to bypass the parents, because if the parents knew some of the stuff they're actually chanting away there, it's pretty grotesque stuff, you know. Yeah.
Exactly. And I just want to thank you for making me aware of how they push these things in entertainment and things like that, because, you know, the entertainment is, like you say, it's over a lot of people's heads. It's kind of under the radar, and a lot of people don't realize that they're being programmed under the threshold of consciousness through the entertainment.
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing when you look into the little messages that they implant in, this entertainment.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I've put together a little forum. It's called, the address is thcforum.ning.com. And, we've just been trying to analyze this disgusting culture they're hitting us with, this entertainment and this music. And, it's very sinister what they're pushing.
Yeah, the thing is too, though, they really did come out in the culture industry and those at the top who control the culture industry, and it is controlled and it's directed as to where they're going to take it. And now, linguistic minimalism was one of their goals, being, and this is from the big scientists at the top, they said, if we can reduce the vocabulary, then eventually they'll be unable to even exchange opinions or ideas, and they'd be obedient, because if they were angry, you couldn't get people stirred up to rebel or whatever, because you literally couldn't express your feelings to them. So that's part of it. The other part was also to create a common culture, a youth culture that would be so separate, so different from their parents, that they would be in complete control of those who led them through the culture industry and the educational authorities. So this is not just happenstance. Back in the 60s, you had a variety of music to choose from. Varieties. You had all kinds of folk, traditional, old stuff, new stuff. You had classical playing too. You had jazz. You had the early pop music and so on. But gradually they eliminated everything until it's just this way, and that's Much Music's TV, and that's all you get now across the whole planet. And it's even in Africa, you'll see the guys in Africa, they don't even have shoes, but they've got the hat on backwards, and they're trying to even make their own baggy pants, because everyone wants to be the same as what they see as these stars. Now, I've talked to a lot of the guys up in the rap industry, and some of them actually admitted to me that they'd go into the studio with a plain little kind of song, and in would come the big boys and start changing this, changing that, until they're killing cops, and it's all about, I can't even say having relations with women anymore. It's beyond that. It's what dogs do in the heat. They just use the words for it now, and the parents can't even hear this stuff. They don't understand what the words are. But it literally is debasing humans, both male and female, down to a lower status than animals. Animals breed when they have to. This is literally, it's like teaching them to have a rutting season perpetually. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you heard, but one of the forerunners in the hip-hop community, his name is KRS-One, and he's actually what you could call sort of a darling in the alternative news circuit.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually created what's called the gospel of hip-hop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said that hip-hop is actually divine.
Mm-hmm.
So what he's doing, he's released this sort of Bible, and he's actually turning hip-hop into a religion.
Well, he won't be just the one that's doing it. There'll be bigger boys than him. All these guys at the bottom are puppets, and they do as they're told. They're guided, directed. But the whole idea of just have sex at all times with anybody, blah, 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 was to stop bonding, because they don't want people breeding and having families. That was what Huxley himself said too. He said eventually, Julian Huxley said, at UNESCO said that in that book you're reading, in fact, he said, it says, we'll find so much ways of contraceptives will alter the family way of life till there's no family at all. And he says that the people could be living in very poor conditions worldwide. It says, but at least they can have sex all day and all night long with no consequences, no offspring. That was the main thrust of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But no bonding, you see. Yeah.
And there isn't. And you can chalk a lot of it up to also our dependence on the nanny state.
Yeah.
Because I'm a black man,
mm-hmm.
And it's sad what they've done to the black community and what we've allowed to be done to ourselves.
Yes.
Through this dependence on the nanny state, because what they do is they offer them these, child support, the welfare benefits, and such,
Mm-hmm.
But what they do is, they encourage the man not to be in the house.
Yeah.
And with the child support, the government garnishes his check,
mm-hmm.
and they take half of the money out of what the woman gets in the form of child support for themselves.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. See, they use those communities. First, you make them dependent on the social service division. They have total control over you. Then, they love this. It's a test group, you understand, and it's a test group. What works with one group will work with any group. And they did a lot of experimentation in those communities. Once they have them dependent, you're quite right. Yeah.
So, you know, the man is like, well, is she trying to sleep with me so she can get child support money?
Yeah.
Then the woman is like, well, is he, you know, just trying to sleep with me because he's trying to be some rapper or something like that? And you have these two people who are, you know, suspicious of each other, and the family is going to break down before it even starts.
You're right. That was the full intention of it, and they've been awfully successful across the board, and very few people know how to bond anymore. And the next generation growing up that are maybe 12 right now are going to be worse because they've had far more scientific indoctrination. They think nothing of oral sex. When you look at all the studies in the newspapers and from the schools themselves, the teachers are even saying, you know, after they come back on a Monday, they were used to how they used to chat about what they'd done. The children literally are all chatting at 12-year-olds of the partners that they had sexual-wise. That's standard now, yeah. But they'll never bond with anybody for their lives, and that's exactly why they introduced this kind of system.
Exactly. And people ask, where is the cervical cancer coming from, you know? And when you actually look into it, you know, where the cervical cancer is coming from, a lot of it is actually caused by a chemical in the condoms.
And also various anti-spermicides they're using as well, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what really blows your mind when you start looking into this, because a lot of it just goes back to problem, reaction, solution, and things like that, that the medical industry, the FDA, is profiting off of. And, you know, the culture creationists themselves, they're profiting, you know, like I say, from this breakdown of the family.
Yeah, but you understand that this is literally it's a scientific and it's a military strategy plan to destroy all that was to bring in the new. That's what they said themselves. And as I say, the main target was to stop all bonding, create incredible promiscuity until no one's happy with anyone else except for one-night stands. And then there'd be no offspring. And plus, it destroys the culture that held people together. There's strength in numbers. There's strength in the family. And even one person, just one person, your wife with you, gives you that extra strength and you with her. But when you have nobody to stand up for you, the government then is in charge of you with all of its fear tactics. Yeah. But thanks for calling.
Alan, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for calling. I mean, here's a quote from Zygmunt Brzezinski. And it's from his book Out of Control, Global Turmoil on the Eve of the 21st Century. It says, television gives the young viewer a first glimpse of the outside world. It first defines, and does so compellingly by combining the visual and audio impacts, the meaning of the good life. In other words, it gives you fantasy to follow, right? That's all they see is these guys that they've got diamond and gold bracelets dangling off them. That's wealth, eh? It sets the standard of what is to be considered achievements, fulfillments, good taste, and proper conduct. Now, proper conduct can be debauchery nowadays. They've reversed it. It conditions desires because if you get nothing but girls dancing on TV that look like strippers, that's what its intention is. If you're so dumb you don't know that, that's to stimulate desire and make you rather disgruntled with the person you're living with, your wife. Defines aspirations and expectations and draws a line between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. With audiences around the world increasingly glued to television sets, there is nothing comparable either in the era of enforced religious orthodoxy or even at the high point of totalitarian indoctrination to the cultural and philosophical conditioning that television exercises on its viewers. Now, he's a guy who should know, because that was part of his job, was how to control the minds of millions of people and create this future, this planned future that we're now in today. Now, there's another caller on the line. That's Dave from Arizona. Are you there, Dave?
Hey, Alan.
Yes.
How are you?
Not bad.
Just to continue to go along that line of predictive programming, just something I've noticed in the last 8 years, the horror genre is like one of my favorite genres growing up.
Yeah.
And it's just like the movies now, and I'm talking about movies like Hostel and Saw, are just garbage. I mean, they're just junk. And I mean, you can tell that basically it's just to remove humanity and just, it's very impersonal.
Yes.
You know, it's not like a shark or it's not like something from outer space. It's like movies that highlight people who are sadistic and they like to torture and they like to murder.
You're right. You see the ones at the top who run the world, the psychopaths, they're deviants and they are sadomasochists. And all power structures you find really are formed after the sadomasochistic tendencies. You find this with those who worshipped Lenin, still do. Those who worshipped Stalin, a guy who killed everyone close to him. People literally worshipped him. The people who worshipped Adolf Hitler, his close officers round about him, even at the trials and so on, had absolute glorification for him. But here's the thing with sadomasochists. They worship the one with more power above them, but they hate and despise the weaker one beneath them, of a lower rank. And the culture industry today is full, absolutely full of sadomasochism. Absolutely. You're right. Yeah.
Right, because two more examples. I mean, I didn't see this movie, but I've seen this highlight. I mean, you couldn't pay me to see this movie, but there's a movie called Inglourious Basterds. And they actually show some guy beating some guy's brains out.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to ask yourself, Alan, why do we need to see this?
You know why you're seeing that? Because it's a process of desensitization and the devaluation of human life. And so are all those CSI programs on TV. Here's another stiff in, and they start ripping the body apart like it was just a pound of meat. It's not a person. You're being desensitized constantly, right down to, as I say, our relationships between male and female. That's been the biggest war of all, and they can't bond anymore. And all the male is and all the female is are sexual objects, and they'll discuss how good it was in the sack that night. That's all it's about today, not bonding at all, because if bonding comes along, there's a power there with the two of them, and then you have offspring. They do not want offspring, but they do want us desensitized. And that way too, when the big trouble starts and the riots start and you go through periods of chaos, when you see the brains at the side of the road that the cops have just bashed out of somebody, it won't affect you quite as much. You'll go along like a robot and pass them by.
Yeah. Right, because it's like the Western society is now a male-hating society.
It is absolutely a male-hating society. That was the main target was against the male, and they've been very successful about it. And guys today don't know what they really truly are anymore. They can't be a man anymore. They can't stand up. Even for their wives sometimes,
Thanks a lot, Alan.
Thanks for calling. Sad but true, but this war has been long and vicious, subtle and scientifically organized and pushed from the top down, as always. But we've got to fight back. It's worth it. From Hamish myself in Ontario, Canada, it's good night. To me, your God or your gods go with you. Hi folks, this is Alan Watt and we're cutting through the matrix talking to John from Alaska about the school system. Carry on, John.
Yes. In my journey to awakening to how they've been trying to create this world culture, I've come across UNESCO, its purpose and its philosophy, written by Julian Huxley.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're probably familiar with that.
Yeah, I've read some of his stuff on the air, in fact, from his books, yeah.
Okay. Well, of course, you can get this for free online, if any of you...
So carry on, yeah.
But yes, I mean, now UNESCO was also investigated in California for being charged with pushing internationalism. A lot of people aren't aware of that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's the United Nations right there pushing internationalism and world government and a world culture. And from what I've seen, Alan, it seems like they're pushing this hip hop style culture on the entire planet. Because I'm up here in Alaska, and when I got here, never be wholly realized through the means of the means assigned to its education, science, and culture. He says it must envisage some form of world political unity, whether through a single world government or otherwise, and he says, and the only certain means for avoiding war. And let me see. Now, closing here, he has an interesting, well, this is on page 21. He has an interesting reference to eugenics and how they were going to push eugenics through UNESCO.
Yeah.
And it says, thus, even though it is quite true that any radical eugenic policy will be for many years politically and psychologically impossible, it will be important for UNESCO to see that the eugenic problem is examined with the greatest care and that the public mind is informed of the issues at stake so that much that is now unthinkable may at least become thinkable.
That's right. And what he was talking about there was terminating children, sterilizing the ones that they would claim were inferior. Now, remember too, UNESCO's United Nations, again, educational and scientific organization, he was the first CEO for it. He was also the top character who helped run the Margaret Sanger abortion clinics across the world. So he was for reducing the inferior quality types of peoples.
Listeners would like to look through this, but would you mind if I read a few of the quotes?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. On page 57, it says, not much remains to be said in conclusion, but what remains is important. It is that the task before UNESCO is necessary, is opportune, and in spite of all multiplicity of detail, is single. And he says that task is to help the emergence of a single world culture. That's on page 57.
That's right.
On page 13, he says, the moral for UNESCO is clear. The task laid upon it of promoting peace and security can